Thank you, Mr Common and Mr Cohen, for making time to be with us this morning. Mr Common, in your opening statement, you acknowledged that there has been a history of some very serious misconduct, conduct that I think you're not proud of today sitting here. A lot of people have been hurt by that behaviour in the past, and I want to focus initially on what's being done to heal some of those problems. You mentioned that the stories coming out of the Royal Commission have been the things that have touched you most, and you're probably aware that of 10,000 submissions, just 27 people have had the opportunity to tell their stories. I don't think that's sufficient, and as a consequence, I am travelling around Australia with the help of some of my colleagues to speak to people who have been victims of bank misconduct. So I want to make a few comments about what I'm hearing from those people and then perhaps get a response from you about some of the things that you're doing to manage these issues. The first thing I want to make clear is how incredibly hurt people have been by some of the actions of your institutions and others. I've met a lot of people who have had very significant mental health issues, for example, and I stress to say not from the incident that put them into financial hardship, but in fact from the treatment of your bank and others. I've spoken to people who have got anxiety, stress, people who have attempted suicide, people who have lost their family home, farmers who have lost farms that have been in their family for generations. At every forum I go to, people break down, men break down in front of me as they talk about the things that have happened at the hands of some of the big banks. And I also want people to understand that a lot of the people I'm speaking to have never missed a payment on their loan. Some of them have, I accept that, but a lot of these people have never missed a payment. I want you to understand that CBA is overrepresented in these discussions. You're certainly not running the only bank in town that's got problems that need to be resolved, but I'm meeting a lot of people who are having difficulties dealing with your organisation. One of the issues that I'm most worried about coming out of these discussions is the way that I see the Commonwealth Bank is abusing the law, using the power that you have in courts, the power you have to marshal major law firms, to take on people who are powerless and who are representing themselves in Supreme Courts around this country, and I think that's completely inappropriate, and I'll go to one of those cases momentarily. So you've said some of the things that you're doing to change the culture within the bank. I want to believe that you're trying to do this, and the best way that you can show us is by dealing with the problems that are in front of you, and they are some of the people who've been affected by misconduct. So firstly, I'd like to understand what you have done so far to actually appreciate the impact that this has had on people. I believe the only way you can do that is by meeting yourself with people who have been victims of bank misconduct. What have you done about that so far?
So look, I'd agree with your comment, and I certainly acknowledge the hurt and the very, very difficult circumstances that some of our customers have found themselves in, and some of that as a result of our actions. I agree that there is no substitute for hearing that directly and in person. As I said, I've spoken to a number of customers, some over the phone, some face-to-face.
Can you give us a sense, Mr Common, of how many customers you might have spoken to so far?
Face-to-face, less than 10, of which I'm seeing one today, who may be in the gallery, I'm not sure, but I know has travelled interstate and offered to see me knowing that I'd be in Canberra today, and I very happily took them up on that.
Yep.
As you would appreciate, to get a proper understanding of the individual cases, some of them are very complex and they do take quite a bit of time. And to the extent that you, and it sounds like you do, have some specific instances, I'd be very happy to follow up with you directly.
Yeah, I'll do that, and thank you, Mr Common. Could I just invite you to consider whether you might make more of an effort to meet with more people who've been affected by this? I say that because the people who sit down and hear these stories are changed by those stories, and I don't think this problem can be fully understood without hearing straight from the people affected. So I would really urge you and some of your senior staff to take the time to speak to some more people. So there's obviously going to be a backlog of issues and hurt that's been created by the misconduct that you referred to in your opening statement. Can you explain to us the process that you're going through to manage some of those past cases where I think based on what you're saying, the bank might have operated quite differently to how you did back then? Can you tell us how you're repairing some of those issues?
Yeah, look, and David referred to some of this earlier. I mean, we have a large team in place, both in our complaints team as well as our customer advocate, but we're also using people from different parts of the business and also making sure that we have people with fresh perspective. I mean, one of the people that I've worked closely with over the last 5 or 6 months since coming into the chief executive role is actually the person who's been running our team responding to the Royal Commission, because they, as you said, have heard and had seen and have read all of the different submissions and also bring a fresh perspective to that. I have quite a large team actually outside my office going through a number of those cases. There's about 15 or so letters which I signed yesterday. I've got another dozen or so to go through. I accept your point, and wherever practical, I'm very happy to meet with people face to face. And I agree, there is no substitute from hearing and allowing someone to tell their story in person, as well as, of course, understanding whether we've done anything wrong. But unfortunately, when it comes to financial institutions and the extension of credit, whether it's the bank's fault or not, when something goes wrong, the consequences for individuals are very, very severe. Absolutely. And I've seen that, and I led the bank's remediation of Storm Financial in 2009. I spoke to 600 customers one night in Brisbane, and I was able to get a lift home with 2 of the customers that were there, and they told me their story. They were similar age to my mother. They'd lost everything. They'd leveraged their home into a margin loan. One of the customers was working part-time in a Subway store. The other, they'd lost all of their superannuation.
Yeah.
They are harrowing stories for, unfortunately, everyday Australians who, in some instances, have lost their life savings.
Yeah.
It's not lost on me for a moment. And I do
I'm
think
glad
it's
about
important.
that. So that would be good. So Mr. Comyn, I think a number of us on the committee here have raised the issue of victims of past misconduct. It would be really useful for us to be able to touch on this subject at your next appearance at this committee, and perhaps if we can work with your team to understand what some parameters might be around measuring the rate at which you are working through those cases. We'd really like to see some progress, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
So, Mr. Comyn, I want to raise one case which I think is probably one of the worst, and there's a very high bar there. The case of Juliana Mandarino, who is a woman who I met with earlier this week. I have permission to discuss some of the details of her case with you. This woman was a victim of fraud, a fraud that was conducted by some of the people who were once employed by your bank. She never did, as far as I'm aware, she never did anything wrong. She was defrauded by someone who worked in your institution. At the time, she owned her own house. She lived with her 2 primary school-aged children. She was a single parent. Today, she lives in a rooming house, and she has been in conflict with your institution now for 12 years. The way that she has been treated is nothing short of despicable, and I want to understand why the bank has treated someone in this manner.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you today. I am, and I haven't read through the case in detail, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's a loan that was originated in 2006. Is that the? And I believe there was some sort of legal process in 2009. I'm not suggesting that was adequate. Again, I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. And
I would really like you to consider this, because 12 years of her life have been devoted to trying to get her house back, and she didn't do anything wrong. And the bank has put her through a legal hell to try to get justice, and it just can't continue. So could I just ask you to look into her case, please, and see if there's something that can be resolved here so she can put this episode behind her, whether she can, she's never going to get that 12 years of her life back, and if that happened to you or me, I think we'd be screaming injustice right now. I want to raise the issue also of the Perry family, and I'm not sure if you've had any interaction with this family, but this is a farming family who are operating a farm in Victoria. They fell on difficult times during a drought, and I raise this issue because this is very much current discussion within the bank, and hence an opportunity for us to see some different behaviour. One of the things I'm finding very frustrating about this is that they've had opportunities to plant crops. Although they were in financial difficulty, I believe at one stage they got back on their feet. They were in a position to plant crops, and the bank would not provide them with a facility to do that. And so the land is sitting there without any planting on it. Economic value going to waste, as I understand it, because of the conduct of the bank. Do you have a response on that one? You're nodding at me, Mr. Kine. I wonder if you know something about this case.
Yes, so Mr. O'Neill, it is a current matter of discussion with the customer. We don't have consent to air their personal affairs in this public forum, so would be happy to go into it in detail with you, as obviously you're familiar with it to a degree.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, Mr. Cohen, because we're hearing a lot of very warm noises about the fact that there's a drought on, and the fact is that there are farmers right now who are in trouble, and this seems to be a family who's doing it very tough and not getting the sort of empathy that we might expect. I'll just raise a final matter, which is that of Tasha Keys. Again, not sure if either of you have had any interaction with Ms. Keys. She is also a single mum. She's lost her farm. And of all the cases that I've heard, this is probably one where I think the worst of abuse of the law has been instigated against this woman. I think the original sum that was being fought over was $200,000. The estimate is that the Commonwealth Bank would have spent somewhere near $1 million now fighting over this case. This woman, I think she's from Brisbane. She travels to Sydney to the Supreme Court to go through hearings with the bank. She faces off against a barrister, a partner in a major legal firm, and 2 lawyers, and she is representing herself in the Supreme Court. I do not understand what the bank's objective is here. If you win the case, this woman doesn't have any assets. Can you help me understand why the bank is using the law in this way against customers?
Yeah, so, Ms. O'Neill, I don't know the precise facts of that matter, but again, just given the public forum nature, I would be happy to take it up with you separately and give you that understanding as to what's happening and why. Okay,
thank you. I would really appreciate that. These are 3 of thousands of cases around Australia. They highlight for me some of the major issues of concern. As a politician, it's my job to understand what the public standards are, and I'm telling you that these, in my mind, don't meet the public standards, so perhaps we can have a conversation about how they can be resolved.
Very happy to do that.
Finally, let me move to another subject, which is the Australian Banking Association's announcement yesterday about the fees for no service. I need to share with you how the public, I think, is receiving this, and that is that we have an announcement yesterday where there seems to be the expectation of accolades that the banks are saying that they will not charge fees to dead people. That is not acceptable, and I can't imagine what discussion is going on around the ABA board where these things are occurring. Commissioner Hayne has made it pretty clear that he thinks this is against the law anyway. So are we really at the point where the code of practice is just saying that the bank needs to follow the law?
No, of course, the A should be no accolades. B, it shouldn't be expected for us to reiterate something that should never have occurred. I think. But
why the media release and the fanfare yesterday?
Well, I can't speak exactly to the process of yesterday. I can only think that it was designed to ensure that there was consistency and confidence about how seriously the industry is taking it. It is absolutely should not be designed, and it's regrettable if it was interpreted by anyone as seeking accolades. It's unacceptable conduct that should never have occurred.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Neill. We have.
Authorised by Claire O'Neill, ALP, Canberra.